Agriculture is the backbone of Zimbabwe's economy and occupies a pivotal position in the development of the country. Approximately 80% of the population is dependent on agriculture for their livelihood. In 1991, agriculture contributed 20% of the GDP, about one-third coming from the subsistence farmers on communal lands, and employed 67% of the labor force. Internationally, Zimbabwe was considered the breadbasket of Africa. Beginning the year 2000, there's been a sharp decline in agricultural productivity, resulting in shortage of food and reduced income, especially to smallholder farmers in Zimbabwe. The decline is largely attributed to a combination of factors that include unreliable rainfall, low and unattractive producer prices, declining investment in agriculture, poor extension support, poorly developed input supply markets, shortages and high prices of key inputs, declining soil fertility, insecure land tenure, lack of proper land and crop management skills, and the implementation of the controversial land redistribution program by the Zimbabwe government. Donors and relief agencies have traditionally responded by providing mass food aid, seed and fertilizers, agricultural inputs to establish farmers' cropping enterprises. The disadvantages of these measures is that they address the short-term food requirements, ignoring the underlying constraints. Research conducted in the region indicates that some of the underlying crop management problems facing farming in Zimbabwe can be overcome if farmers adopt conservation agriculture techniques. And if practiced to a high standard, conservation agriculture can significantly boost production and improve the food security and livelihoods of farming households. That's why in 2004, the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, of the United Nations, in conjunction with Agritechs and various non-governmental organizations, introduced conservation agriculture, CA, in an effort to create long-term solutions to the growing food security problems faced by Zimbabwe. The various practices that make up conservation agriculture follow key principles based on conservation of soil, water, nutrients, and farm power.
Conservation agriculture, or CA, is a type of farming that conserves, improves, and makes more efficient use of the natural resources of soil and water through integrated management of these resources, combined with the external resources like labor and fertilizers.
Conservation agriculture takes advantage of natural ecological processes to conserve moisture, enhance soil fertility, and improve soil structure. It reduces soil erosion and the presence of disease and pests. These benefits are achieved through the application of 6 key principles: minimum soil disturbance, mulching and minimal burning of crop residues, mixing and rotating crops, timely implementation, precise operations, and efficient use of inputs. These principles have been successfully implemented on both small-scale and large-scale farms, including irrigated plots in the region.
Talking about CA, we are normally talking about 3 major farming principles. The basic one is reduced soil movement, which can be referred to as minimum tillage or zero tillage. In this principle, the soil is moved as little as possible, whereby the farmer only moves the soil where the seed is being placed. And the advantage of this principle is the soil structure is improved, allowing more water to infiltrate into the soil. The second principle is the maintenance of soil cover on the soil surface. In this one, we mean that the soil surface is always covered, at least we recommend 30%, by some organic material. There may be leaves, grass, or crop residues. And then the third principle under CA is that principle of crop rotations or interaction, where a farmer combines or introduces other crops in the farming cycle. In other words, if the farmer is growing maize, he doesn't grow maize every season. He actually changes into other crops. Those are the three major principles, but to make CA work, I think we will normally add a fourth principle of good management.
In Chishawasha Communal Area, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, through the European Union Food Facility Project, distributed seed and fertilizer to 500 vulnerable small-scale farmers. Out of these, a local non-governmental organization, Foundations for Farming, is implementing conservation agriculture with 250 farmers who were convinced that conservation agriculture was the way to go. Because Foundations for Farming is a Christian-based organization, they've coined the term farming God's way to refer to conservation agriculture. The main crops grown are maize, paprika and sugar beans, and mulch conservation is the main principle being practiced. One of the farmers on the Foundations for Farming program, Mrs. Wadawafa, is beginning to see the benefits of mulching conservation agriculture. She speaks about the conservation agriculture principles she followed to achieve such an impressive crop.
Ivhu redu rinenge rakasimba tichiita crop rotation tichingosiya nzvimbo diki diki uchidyara beans nyimo uchisanganisa sanganisa kuti ivhu rako rirambe rakasimba usinga kuti chibage chisazobatwa nezvirwere. Saka ndo zvakandibatsira pamulching uye yakandikohwesa zvandisati ndamboona. Ndandiri munhu anga asingagoni kurima asi pandakangodzidzirawo farming God's way ndakaona zviri kutondibatsira ndikaita shungu. Ezvinezvi ndakutogona kana kuswera mumunda asina asingazive kubata badza kana kusakura.
Before joining the Foundation for Farming Conservation Agriculture program, 50-year-old Stephen Churao was a frustrated farmer who struggled to feed his family, relying mostly on humanitarian aid. But now, with the prospects of a bumper harvest, Stephen says he'll not be registering for food aid this year.
Pachibawe chamuri kuona ichi takachera makomba ndokuisa compost mugomba ndokuisa kakapu ke-D kwakudyara chibawe. Gore rino tichatokohwa zvandakapfuura zvandakaita gore rakapera nemarimiro andandakaita apa. Kwana pamusha chinokwana kufidha mhuri yese. Tichitarisira zvakare kuzotengesa chimwe chacho.
Another beneficiary, Mtizwa, expressed joy and happiness as to how his crops have progressed in comparison to the seasons when he practiced conventional farming.
But the good thing is here. Saka taicheka uswa uko pasi uko tichituta nebhara tichiuya tichisesa mukati umu. Asi iye zvinezvi handigoni kusiya apa ndichiita zvimwe zvinhu ndokuti ndikuona kuti zviri zvazvinoreva mandiri. Chasara iye zvino tambanudza munda uyu kuti kure kupinda zvawakaita izvi. Taiwana kuma 15 bags tisina izvi but kazhinji zvakadai so aiwa ndikutarisira pakuru.
Mai Hatidani received agricultural inputs but chose not to join the Foundations for Farming Conservation Agriculture program. She practiced the conventional type of farming, which requires cattle draft power to clear the fields. As a result, she planted late. The poor state of her crop and the competing weeds in her plot is testimony why farmers should adopt conservation agriculture farming techniques.
Antina mombe ndakangochomawo kune vamwe ndikati pendinenge ndazongoiwanira ndidi ndozokupai mari yenyu saka vakati $30 zvokuti ndaisai ndavapa ndiri ngozoti pendinenge ndawanira ndovapawo zvangu.
Generally in Zimbabwe, very few small-scale farmers have access to draft power, therefore most depend on third-party ploughing of their land. Conservation agriculture techniques can be adopted by both farmers with resources, such as animals and implements, as well as those farmers who have no draft power or equipment. Mike Seeger has been practicing commercial farming in Zimbabwe for over 30 years. He lost his farm due to the controversial land redistribution program. Mike now spends his time sharing his expertise with the smallholder communal farmers under this project. The Chinese adage, give a man fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime, best describes Seeger's philosophy when it comes to Zimbabwe's agriculture.
We started off with 5 people who took the project on very seriously. It was an eye-opener to me and certainly an eye-opener to those people who initially started the project. It offers huge prospects for Africa. If people could be advised and shown how to farm in this manner, it would revolutionize Africa. There's been serious poverty in the past, and from what I've seen now, the number of people who've taken it on, poverty will cease to be a factor in their lives, which is what my objective is and what all of our objectives involved in this project are.
FAO promotes conservation agriculture because the practice has the potential to significantly increase yields and productivity of farmers, especially smallholder farmers. Currently, over 80,000 communal households are being assisted in conservation agriculture through receiving inputs and extension. Others are adopting it without receiving any input assistance, since they've noticed the dramatic improvement in productivity under CA. Since 2002, the EU has been actively involved in financing projects that aim to boost agriculture production and ensure food security in Zimbabwe. The principal objective is to improve agriculture productivity and consequently reduce the dependency of vulnerable rural communal households on humanitarian assistance.
And between 2002 and 2009, we have implemented around 700 million euros and in various projects to support the population. And the main areas of support have been food aid and food security, health and basic education that we call social sectors, and then the third is human rights governance and no support to the implementation of the GPA. When it comes to food aid and food security, at the beginning of 2002 we focused more on food aid, but since then we have moved more to provide food security as much as possible instead of food aid, because we think that it is better for this country, because we think that the assistance provided under food security is more sustainable and therefore better. And there is no reason why we should not do that, even if we are in a restrictive cooperation.
Conservation agriculture has multiple benefits for farmers, for their households and communities, and for the environment.
These green beans will use the maize stalk as a structure to support its growth up there, and it will actually grow to the top of this maize plant and probably run over to the next door one as well. And he will receive a continuous supply of green beans out of this. He will harvest it as they mature, ready for eating as green beans.
Some of these gains will become obvious during the first season of implementing conservation agriculture, while others take time to materialize. Farmers can get the maximum benefits if they apply the key principles of conservation agriculture and properly manage implementation with support from extension workers. It's our hope that in the coming years, conservation agriculture will bring increased food security and prosperity to many more households and communities in Zimbabwe.